You call this professional behavior, Amy? The sharp voice of the hospital CEO, Carl Benson, cut through the sterile air of the hospital hallway like a scalpel. His icy glare pierced through me as I stood frozen, clutching the patient's chart to my chest. My heart hammered in my ribcage, but I refused to look away. This hospital isn't a charity. Nurse Amy, he continued, his voice laced with venom. You don't waste resources on people who clearly can't pay their bills. Do you have any idea how bad this looks for us? I glanced toward the frail, unconscious man lying on the gurney behind me. His clothes were tattered, his face pale and bruised. He had been found slumped near the hospital entrance earlier that morning, barely clinging to life. Every instinct in me screamed to help him, no matter his status or appearance. With all due respect, sir, I said, my voice trembling but firm, he's a human being. He was dying. How could I just... Carl's hand shot up, silencing me. Don't lecture me, nurse, he snapped. Your job is to follow orders, not play the hero. My blood boiled at his words. Was this what medicine had come to? Profit over people? I had joined this hospital to make a difference, not to be berated for doing what any decent person would. You're done here, Carl said coldly. Consider this your termination. Pack your things and leave by the end of the day. My breath caught in my throat. Fired? For saving someone's life? My mind reeled, but I forced myself to hold my head high. Fine, I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. But if saving a life is grounds for dismissal, then maybe this hospital isn't the place for me. As I turned to walk away, I caught a glimpse of the patient's face. Something about him seemed familiar, but I couldn't place it. Little did I know, that man would soon upend my life in ways I couldn't have imagined. I headed to my locker, fighting back tears as I packed my belongings. The hospital's fluorescent lights seemed harsher, the walls closing in as whispers from my colleagues reached my ears. Some pitied me. Others silently agreed with Carl but didn't dare say it out loud. It didn't matter. I wasn't ashamed of what I'd done. Before leaving, I made one last stop at the patient's bedside. He was still unconscious, hooked up to the machines I had fought to connect him to. His breathing was shallow but steady. His hand, rough and calloused, lay limp on the stark white sheet. I'm sorry, I whispered. I hope you wake up and get another chance at life. You deserve that much. With a final glance, I walked out of the hospital, the weight of injustice pressing heavily on my chest. 3 days passed. I spent them job hunting and wrestling with the anger simmering inside me. How could Carl Benson, a man sworn to uphold the values of healthcare, be so cruel? But the world didn't stop for my frustration. Bills needed paying and I had to move forward. Then, on a quiet afternoon, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find a man standing there, clean-shaven and dressed in an expensive suit. My heart skipped a beat as recognition dawned. It was the patient. The same man I had risked my job for, now looking like he'd stepped out of a magazine. Miss Amy, he said, his deep voice steady but kind. May I come in? I nodded, still stunned, and stepped aside. He entered, his movements deliberate, his eyes scanning the modest apartment. I owe you an explanation, he began, taking a seat at my small kitchen table. And a debt I don't know how to repay. I sat across from him, still trying to process what was happening. You don't owe me anything, I said. I was just doing my job. Or at least what I thought it was. He gave a small, knowing smile. You did more than your job. You did what was right. And that's something not everyone has the courage to do. His words sent a rush of warmth through me, but confusion still lingered. Who are you? I asked, my voice soft. His smile widened, and he leaned forward slightly. My name is Jonathan Ward, he said, and I'm the founder and majority owner of Ward Memorial Hospital. My jaw dropped. You? You're the owner? Yes, he said, his tone serious now. And it seems I owe my life to you. I was undercover, assessing how my hospitals were being run. Unfortunately, things didn't go as planned, and I was attacked outside the very facility I built. If not for you, I wouldn't be here. The gravity of his words sank in. I had saved the life of the man who controlled the very institution that had cast me out. Jonathan's expression hardened. What happened to you was unacceptable. I trusted Carl Benson to uphold the values of this hospital, but it seems he's forgotten what those values are. I leaned back, unsure how to respond. I didn't save you expecting anything in return, I said honestly. I know, he replied. That's exactly why you deserve so much more. Over the next few hours, Jonathan shared his plan to return to the hospital and take charge once again. He was furious about the corruption and greed that had taken root in his absence. And you, he said, his gaze locking onto mine, are coming back with me. Not as a nurse under Carl's thumb, but as someone I trust to help me rebuild this hospital the right way. My eyes widened. What? You want me to come back? But I'm just a nurse. You're more than that, Amy, he said firmly. You're proof that compassion and integrity still exist in this field. That's exactly what we need. 2 days later, Jonathan and I walked into the hospital together. The staff froze, their eyes widening as they recognized him. Carl Benson's smug expression faltered when he saw us approach. Jonathan, Carl exclaimed, forcing a wide smile. What a surprise. We weren't expecting you. Jonathan didn't return the smile. Clearly, he said, his voice cold. Let's talk in your office. Now. The tension in the room was palpable as we followed Carl. Once inside, Jonathan wasted no time. Explain yourself, he demanded, his tone sharp. Carl's fake smile disappeared. I don't know what you mean. Firing a nurse for saving my life? Jonathan's voice rose, his anger barely contained. Running this hospital like a business rather than a place of healing? You've betrayed everything this institution stands for. Carl stammered, but Jonathan cut him off. Pack your things, Carl. You're done here. As Carl Benson stormed out of the hospital, his face a mask of humiliation, a ripple of whispers spread through the staff. Some looked relieved, others confused, but all eyes eventually turned to Jonathan Ward. He addressed them with authority. Let me make one thing clear, he began, his voice carrying through the room. This hospital was built to serve people, not profit from their pain. Today marks the beginning of a new chapter. For those willing to uphold the values of compassion, integrity, and excellence, you have nothing to fear. But for anyone who has exploited this system, your time here is over. The staff exchanged uneasy glances. Jonathan wasn't finished. And this, he added, gesturing to me, is Amy. Without her courage, I wouldn't be here today. She's not just a nurse. She's a leader, and I expect you to treat her as such. My cheeks flushed as murmurs rippled through the crowd. The weight of his words hit me, but I couldn't let them distract me from what mattered. Jonathan wasted no time. We dove headfirst into uncovering the depth of corruption that had seeped into the hospital. Together, we reviewed financial records, interviewed staff, and listened to the grievances of patients. One revelation after another came to light. Overpriced treatments, unnecessary procedures pushed on vulnerable patients, and funds siphoned off to line the pockets of certain executives. It was worse than we'd imagined. You were right to fight for that man, Jonathan said one evening as we pored over documents in his office. This hospital lost its way long before Carl took over. It's time we bring it back. Winning the staff's trust wasn't easy. Many were skeptical of Jonathan's intentions, and some resented my sudden rise to a leadership position. But I refused to let their doubts deter me. I walked the halls, listening to nurses and doctors, learning their struggles. I advocated for fair schedules, better equipment, and transparency in decision-making. Slowly, the walls of distrust began to crumble. One day, a senior nurse named Linda approached me. I didn't think you'd last, she admitted, her voice tinged with respect. But you've proven me wrong. This place might just have a fighting chance with you and Jonathan leading the charge. The hospital's transformation wasn't just about policies and procedures, it was about people. Patients who had once been treated as numbers now felt seen and cared for. One particularly moving moment came when a single mother, whose child had been denied treatment under Carl's regime, returned to the hospital. With tears streaming down her face, She hugged me tightly. "Thank you," she whispered, "for giving us hope again." That moment reaffirmed everything I'd been fighting for. Just as things seemed to be improving, whispers of sabotage emerged. Former allies of Carl Benson, bitter about their loss of power, began spreading rumors and trying to undermine Jonathan's leadership. One night, as I was leaving the hospital, I noticed a suspicious figure lurking near the administrative offices. My pulse quickened, but I didn't let fear stop me. I followed them, staying in the shadows. What I discovered chilled me to the bone. The figure was a trusted department head, colluding with an external party to siphon funds and destabilize the hospital. Armed with evidence, I rushed to Jonathan's office, my heart pounding. "This can't be true," Jonathan said, staring at the photos and recordings I'd gathered. His face darkened with resolve. "They won't get away with this." The next day, Jonathan called a meeting. The traitors were exposed in front of the staff, their schemes laid bare. "You've betrayed the very people you swore to serve," Jonathan said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "You're finished here." As security escorted them out, the staff erupted in applause. It was a turning point, a moment that solidified Jonathan's leadership and renewed everyone's faith in the hospital's future. With the saboteurs gone, the hospital flourished. New programs were introduced to support underprivileged patients, and staff morale soared. Jonathan and I worked tirelessly, often late into the night, driven by a shared vision. One evening, as we stood on the rooftop overlooking the city, Jonathan turned to me. "You've been incredible through all this," he said, his voice sincere. "So have you," I replied. "This hospital wouldn't be here without you." He smiled, and for the first time I saw not just a leader, but a man who had faced his own struggles and emerged stronger. Months later, the hospital was unrecognizable from the place I had been fired from. It wasn't just a building. It was a beacon of hope for the community. Jonathan announced plans to expand the hospital's reach, building clinics in underserved areas. "This is just the beginning," he said during a celebratory event. As I stood beside him, watching the staff and patients celebrate, I realized how far we'd come. It wasn't just about redemption. It was about creating something lasting and meaningful. As the hospital flourished, so did the challenges. The influx of patients who had been previously turned away strained resources. The staff worked tirelessly, but cracks began to show. Late one night, I found Jonathan poring over financial reports in his office, his usual confidence replaced by worry. "We're growing too fast," he admitted, rubbing his temples. "If we don't find a way to balance this, we could jeopardize everything we've built." "We'll figure it out," I said, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "We've come too far to let it fall apart now." Jonathan nodded, but the weight of his responsibility was evident. His determination inspired me to step up even more. We turned to the community for help, organizing a fundraising gala to generate the funds needed to support the hospital's expansion. The event was grand, with patients, staff, and local leaders in attendance. As I stood at the podium to share our story, I felt a wave of emotion. "This isn't just a hospital," I said, my voice steady. "It's a symbol of what we can achieve when we put people first. Every life we've touched is a testament to the power of compassion and resilience." The room erupted in applause. By the end of the night, we had surpassed our fundraising goal. It wasn't just about the money. It was a reminder of the community's belief in us. Just as things began to stabilize, an unexpected threat emerged. Carl Benson. News broke that he had joined a competing hospital and was actively trying to poach our staff and patients. He spread lies about Jonathan and the changes we had implemented, painting himself as the victim of a power struggle. Jonathan's face was a mask of anger when he read the headlines. "He won't stop until he's torn everything apart. We'll handle this the way we've handled everything else," I said firmly. With truth and integrity. To counter Carl's campaign, we invited journalists to see the hospital firsthand. Patients shared their stories, staff spoke about the positive changes, and Jonathan laid out our vision for the future. One of the journalists asked me, "Why did you stay, even after being fired?" "Because this place isn't just a job to me," I replied. "It's a calling. And no one, no matter how powerful, can take that away. The resulting coverage painted Carl as the opportunist he was and bolstered the hospital's reputation. As Jonathan and I navigated the storm together, our bond deepened. Late nights spent strategizing turned into heartfelt conversations. He shared stories of his early days building the hospital, his struggles with trust, and his hopes for the future. One night, as we walked through the now bustling hallways, he said, "I couldn't have done this without you, Amy." I smiled, feeling the warmth of his words. "We're a team, and we'll face whatever comes next together." Just when we thought the worst was behind us, disaster struck. A fire broke out in one of the hospital wings, forcing an emergency evacuation. The investigation revealed it wasn't an accident. It was arson. Jonathan's jaw clenched as the fire chief delivered the news. "Carl," he said, his voice low, "this has his fingerprints all over it." Determined to protect the hospital, we doubled down on security and launched an independent investigation. The evidence we uncovered was damning. Carl had not only orchestrated the fire but had also bribed officials to cover his tracks. Jonathan held a press conference to expose Carl's actions. "This isn't just an attack on our hospital," he said. "It's an attack on the values we stand for. We won't be intimidated." The public backlash against Carl was swift and unforgiving. The fire damage was extensive, but it didn't break us. Donations poured in and volunteers from the community helped rebuild. The experience brought everyone closer, uniting us in a shared purpose. "It's ironic," I said to Jonathan one evening. "Carl tried to destroy us, but all he did was make us stronger." Jonathan smiled. "Because people like you refused to give up." As the hospital reopened its damaged wing, Jonathan and I reflected on how far we'd come. "This isn't just a victory for us," he said. "It's a victory for everyone who believes in doing what's right." I nodded, my heart swelling with pride. "And it's just the beginning." With the hospital fully restored, Jonathan unveiled a bold plan to expand its impact. "We're not just going to rebuild," he announced to the staff. "We're going to create a network of care centers for underserved communities. This is our chance to set a new standard for healthcare." The room erupted into applause. It was a vision that spoke to all of us, especially me. I had always dreamed of being part of something bigger than myself, and now I was at the heart of it. But behind the excitement, there was an undercurrent of doubt. Expanding the hospital's reach would require enormous resources, careful planning, and unshakable dedication. To everyone's surprise, a prominent philanthropist named Eleanor Marks reached out to Jonathan. Known for her dedication to social causes, Eleanor had read about our struggles and successes. She offered not only a significant donation but also her connections to other influential figures. Jonathan and I met with her in a quiet cafe, her sharp eyes scanning us as we discussed our vision. "I admire what you've done," Eleanor said. "But to make this work, you'll need more than passion. You'll need strategy." Her words were both a challenge and a lifeline. With her support, we gained access to resources that turned our dream into a reality. As the expansion plans unfolded, the strain began to show. Long hours and high stakes created tension among the staff. Even Jonathan and I weren't immune to the pressure. One night, after a particularly grueling meeting, we found ourselves in a heated argument. "You're pushing too hard," I snapped. "People are burning out, and we're losing the heart of what makes this place special." Jonathan's eyes flashed with frustration. "And what do you suggest? That we stop? Give up?" "No," I said, my voice softening. "I'm saying we need to remember why we started this in the first place." The room fell silent, the weight of my words sinking in. Jonathan exhaled deeply, his shoulders relaxing. "You're right," he admitted. "We can't lose sight of the bigger picture." The first of the new care centers opened 6 months later, a modest building in a struggling neighborhood. On the opening day, patients flooded in, their faces reflecting hope and gratitude. As I watched a young boy receive treatment he'd been denied for years, tears welled up in my eyes. This was why we had fought so hard. Jonathan stood beside me, his expression one of quiet pride. "This is just the beginning," he said, echoing the words we'd spoken months ago. Late one night, after a particularly long shift, Jonathan and I found ourselves alone in his office. The city lights twinkled outside the window, casting a soft glow over the room. "You know," he said, breaking the comfortable silence, "I never expected to find someone like you in all of this." I turned to him, surprised. "What do you mean?" "You remind me of what I used to believe in," he said, his voice earnest. "Before all the politics and the pressure, I wanted to make a difference. You brought that back." His words left me speechless. For a moment, the air between us felt charged, but neither of us said anything more. The moment passed, leaving me with a mix of emotions I wasn't ready to confront. Just as things seemed to be settling, Carl Benson made one last attempt to undermine us. He filed a lawsuit against the hospital, claiming wrongful termination and defamation. It was a calculated move, designed to drag us into a costly legal battle. Jonathan's jaw tightened as he read through the court documents. "He's desperate," he said, "but we're not going to let him win." The legal team worked tirelessly, gathering evidence of Carl's mismanagement and unethical practices. When the case finally went to trial, Jonathan's testimony was a masterclass in poise and integrity. The verdict was swift. The court ruled in our favor, and Carl's claims were dismissed. It was a victory, but more importantly, it was a statement that we wouldn't be intimidated. With Carl finally out of the picture, the hospital entered a new era. The expansion continued, reaching more people than we ever thought possible. The staff, once fractured, now worked as a cohesive team, united by a shared purpose. Jonathan and I grew closer, our partnership evolving into something deeper. One evening, as we walked through the hospital's bustling halls, he stopped and turned to me. "Amy," he said, his voice soft but steady, "none of this would have happened without you. You're not just part of this hospital, you're the heart of it." His words took my breath away. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine a future not just as colleagues, but as something more. Years later, as I stood on the stage at a grand celebration marking the hospital's 10th anniversary under Jonathan's leadership, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. "This isn't just a hospital," I said to the crowd. "It's a testament to what we can achieve when we choose compassion over profit, courage over fear, and people over power." The applause was deafening, but my eyes found Jonathan in the crowd. He smiled, a quiet acknowledgement of everything we'd been through together. As the evening unfolded, I realized that this was more than a story of redemption. It was a story of hope, and it was far from over.